Good morning, everybody. It's a huge thrill to be back here in Gothenburg. I did the math the other day. This is number 5. No, 4. 21 was my first. And so I got to do 2 during the COVID times. And this talk is much more like the COVID times talks than the last 2 of my talks. And it's got a funny name. And Patrick gave me a little guff appropriately for the silly name of this particular talk because it doesn't tell you what I'm here to say. This is actually a reference on a reference. It's a Simpsons joke. If you ever saw the episode 22 Short Films About Springfield, which is in turn a riff on, 27 short films about Glenn Gould. It is, all about a couple of little things that we're going to put together into something a little bit bigger. So from that perspective, hi. I'm Tom, and the last time we chatted, I was here to go deep on Apple accounts, and the time before that, I was here to talk deeply about managing software update. I do want to give a huge shout out to Catherine Davis for that amazing session this morning on managing software update with Declarative. If you did not get a chance, watch the recording. Oh my God, so much detail in that 25-minute amazing talk. So this talk is a lot like my talk All at Once from 2022. I like to think that talks that aren't so deeply technical but cover expertise in other areas are still very valuable, and this is one of those talks. When I was here last, I was the Director of Product Management for devices at JumpCloud. It was a privilege to get to serve some of our customers around the world on device management, and now I've transitioned back into IT full-time. And I'm now spending my days working in rock and roll IT at It's My Party. We have 5 venues in Washington, D.C. Atlantis, our newest, is the smallest at 450 people. And Merriweather Post Pavilion, a storied, legendary venue built in the 1960s with a Frank Gehry roof, is our oldest and largest at 21,000 people. We have options for every popularity level of band. And it's a thrill to get to do that work day in and day out. I'm at IMP, which is the parent company of those organizations, to lead a new team and to build IT for a new generation of music goers and venues and complicated places. And that transition had me thinking in the early part of this year, what does it mean to do IT leadership? And that in turn led me to this talk in the last 9 months. I've been in leadership positions for the last 2 decades, whether I wanted to admit it or not, and I've learned a lot about leading people through good times and through bad times. IT leadership has some special and specific challenges to be conquered, and I wanted to share with you some of the best things that I've learned in the last 20 years. In 2006, I started Technolutionary to change how businesses thought about IT and to provide IT leadership for organizations that were maybe not the largest in the world, but certainly had strong technology needs. And I spent 15 years there building practices for businesses of all sizes and shapes, including our friends at IMP, when I was just a contractor. And I spent 15 years there before leaving for JumpCloud in 2021. Some of the lessons that we're going to talk about today are easy lessons. Others are harder. And some of these I'm still adapting to master and learning every day how to change your own approaches for these things. I do want to give special thanks to Diana and Andrina and Andrew for their talks this week, for giving me a lot more to think about as we go into IT leadership and as we focus on things here. This talk will rhyme with theirs. But I suspect that this is as much a cautionary tale for the state of our industry as it is anything else. When it comes to good pieces of advice, there has long been a string of people who've said, all the way back to Sun Tzu, that you have to think like your opposition. In fact, this is probably some of the best advice that we've had to work with, because if you're just thinking about what you want to do, you're not considering all the things that are going to stand in your way. You are not considering all of the things that you will have to adapt to, and that is, quite frankly, asking for a lot of trouble. Oppositional thinking is a great way of conducting the mental exercise necessary to succeed in a particular situation. It means you're working through the challenges of what might happen as you carry out a task. Thinking like other people involved in the situation can show you possible pathways, moves in a chess game, for example, that may happen when you start down a project for a path, and even just as you start building an organizational philosophy. But in IT, who is your adversary? Who could that be? Who do we need to consider as part of that conversation? Well, there are several roles to consider. I want to start with the funny joke version of this. We need to think like our security teams. Who here has a security team that they consider to be adversarial? Laughter, hands raised, all of those things. But this one may be mostly in our head more than anything else. It feels like security is often our enemy. They have requirements, same as us, but we're working for the same goals with different approaches. Our requirements are very different. We're often responsible for implementation and support while they're providing us with requirements and software to engage with. So let's start from the proposition of values for a second. What do we value? What do they value? Where can we find common ground, and where are we opposed? When it comes to putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you have to extrapolate what their approach is, and that means considering what you care about and what they care about. So let's frame things that way. What does security value? Most importantly, they care about not being on the news. It's not a fun time to see your company name on a slide on Hacker News or a story on Slashdot or any of the other tech outlets. IT Register was particularly painful for me once. But you think about it from those perspectives, they do not want as their primary value to be in the news, and I think that that's a valid place for us all to be approaching things. Security is about mitigating and managing risk, and that means placing that priority at the top of the list. Much like our priority is enabling users in their needs and managing the systems that they use, security is a solid counterbalance. Different priorities doesn't mean you can't align with that vision, and doesn't mean that you cannot have shared values. In addition, compliance is a way of showing your investors, your regulators, your business partners, and your prospects and your customers that you take security seriously, and that what you value as an organization is alignment to standards. Those standards are a lot like laboratory conditions, however, in that they provide valuable feedback and approaches, but they are not necessarily compatible with usability, and they are not necessarily compatible with great working experiences. Knowing what they value is helpful to understand also what you value, but what does security not value that you might? They do not value your workflows. They do not value your infrastructure, and they definitely do not value your support queues. Those are your problems to manage, and so as a result, they do not have to care about that particular side of the house. That's your job. And that's where they walk away, unfortunately, sometimes, and you have to deal with that. So there's more than just security out there, and I do want to talk here a little bit about the business. There's two questions you have to think about beyond what values you share and those that you don't. And when it comes to the business, you have to answer two really big questions. How does what you do help them do what they do? And what pressures are they subject to that you can help with? The business can sometimes feel a little inscrutable. It can feel obtuse, it can feel penny pinchy, it can feel capricious even. Welcome to late capitalism. I don't think that's going to get better anytime soon. I think that our business models are going to get more complex, not less. And so as a result, we have to spend our time engaging with our colleagues on the business side to understand their approaches and their pressures and how you can help relieve some of those pressures, either through advanced application of security tooling or compliance, for example, with your colleagues in security, or you have to figure out how to do more with less. So let's talk about your role in it as well. I don't think that you necessarily need an MBA in IT, although you'd certainly be welcome to get one and you'd be broader for the knowledge that you'd have. That becoming a more T-shaped individual, that gives you strength in new and important ways. In IT leadership, you do need to be familiar with your organization's building blocks within the business as a whole. So the question again, what does the business value? It values the business. Secondarily, What does the business not value? Anything else. Be aware you are stepping into dangerous ground. That does not mean you should not tread there anyway. We also have to spend time thinking like our end users. And this is I'm not going to change the title of the slide, but this is the last time I'm going to talk about the end users because they're your co-workers. They're your teammates. They're your friends, maybe not all of them. You're probably not always going out to the pub after work, but they're the people you share a vision with and a mission with, and they're here day in and day out, and you all do have different things to care about. They have their own goals and challenges much like you do. You're there to help out if you can. They're there to help you if they can. That can mean spending your spare capital and time on their success, on their KPIs, not just your own. That can be tough when you're working with less resources. So again, these are your coworkers. Ostensibly, they're on your team. So what do your coworkers and teammates value? They value the ability to do their job and meet their needs and accomplish their goals. They also value a safe and secure working environment, straight down to psychological safety. We've all seen the Nick Burns skit on SNL where he's shoving the person out of the way so that he can fix a problem. That is the last approach you should take. Being a human being and being engaged with your end users engenders trust. And that engenderment of trust is what provides the psychological safety to come to you honestly and clearly when they have clicked through perhaps a phishing link, typed their password and their MFA code into whatever that happened next. Knowing that going into a problem is going to save you immense amounts of time, but the only way that happens is if they trust you at all. So your coworkers and teammates do not necessarily share your values either, and that's okay. They do not value your acronyms and your jargon. They do not have the reference frame for it. They do not value your compliance plans. Again, they don't have the reference frame for it. They do not value your software update plans. Who here has had an irate user whose machine has restarted while they were on a Zoom? Yeah, they do not value your software update plans. In fact, they kind of resent it a little bit. This is your requirement, not theirs. They also do not value your application, and by your, I mean the business's application choices. Who here is a Teams shop? They do not value your phishing tests, and this one's as much on security as it is on you. I think that phishing, it was a huge problem when I arrived at IMP because we were still on an on-prem Zimbra server in a data center, and so MFA was not really a thing for them when it came to email, and so we would lose somewhere between 5 and 10 people a week to an external phishing actor. It was awful. And they did not appreciate when we started doing phishing tests, especially ones that talked about either vacation time, schedule, anything along those lines. They don't appreciate that, and they shouldn't. They're not supposed to. All right. We also have to learn to think like Apple. This is a hard one. How does a $3.8 trillion company think? That was the closing market cap yesterday in the States, $3.816 trillion. I think if I could answer this one completely or with any degree of certainty, I would probably not be here right now. But I can tell you this, Apple has to protect bigger things than you do. They have to operate more slowly than you do, or that you want them to. They have to build on timescales that are practically undreamable within your organization. So carry that into knowledge. I did do the math last night. If you convert the market cap of Apple into bananas, you would have 2.8 trillion kilograms of bananas. That is, however, 10 times the annual production of the world of bananas, according to some ChatGPT research that I did. So take that with a giant bucket of salt. But none of this means that you have to spend a lot of time thinking like Apple. You have to spend a lot more time listening to what they are telling you in order to make your own mental model of what is going to happen. They're big and they're complex, but they do have some predictable values. Security matters deeply to Apple. Take a look at the Secure Enclave. Take a look at the approach that they are taking with identity and the enterprise with Platform SSO. If you're going to ask your team or your colleagues or your security team to go against Apple's own security advice, may I suggest saving that effort for something else? End user privacy also matters deeply to Apple. They believe that your end user, your coworkers, have a reasonable expectation of privacy on their work computer as well. In Europe, that feels normal, but in the United States, that can feel like anathema. Apple's got their challenges, but on this, I feel deeply that the alignment is correct and right, and we should follow their approach. And maybe also you should probably avoid using private APIs or technology that's deprecated, for example, like the MDM software update commands. Sure, sometimes that's not avoidable, but it's not a good place to default your intentions, is to going counter to the stated roadmap when Apple does choose to state their roadmap. Staying on the clear side of it is wise. So what does Apple not care about? Apple does not care about your take on their privacy policy. They have their own. They also do not care about your opinions on their hardware lineup. They have, again, their own, and it's pretty good. They also probably don't care about your take on liquid glass, for good or for ill, because they have their own, and they will tell you, in the future by showing change if they feel like they need to make adaptation. The best way to approach your relationship to Apple is by giving our unvarnished feedback, preferably through Feedback Assistant, although certainly telling your Apple employee friends what you think is certainly wise. It's also important to be supportive of the people that do work there and let them know when they're on the right path as opposed to when they're on a path you cannot follow down. They're a hardworking lot. They put in a lot of hours, they put in a lot of effort, and I've never found anyone who worked at Apple who did not give a shit about the audience here and the people who have to adapt to what they are working on. So appreciate that as well. They're engaged on the hardest job they'll ever love in all likelihood. So I want to finish by saying that largely thinking like Apple isn't possible outside of Apple because you just can't know enough to think like them. What you have to do instead is listen to what they tell you, trust that they are telling you what they believe to be the truth, and adapt accordingly. All right, this is where I have to use my skills in anger and my past experience the same. We have to learn how to think like product managers for a second. There's another class of folks that IT leaders will have to interface with at some point, and that's folks in my old role. Your partnership with the other companies that make software that you use is a valuable one that you can and should influence. So let's talk first about what do product people value, what does the product department role value? They care a lot about the business value of what they are producing. Product folks care deeply about the success of their product, which is measured in terms of value for what they do in the business. That can mean upgrade costs, that can mean subscription revenue, that can mean adoption. It can mean a ton of different things. Sometimes that's measured in monthly recurring revenue, and sometimes it's measured in adoption, but it's measured in killing something that doesn't need to exist also. That can mean deprecating functionality out of your products. That can mean all sorts of other things. They care deeply about the business value that they bring to the organization. In addition, they care about adoption because no one wants to make a useless thing. No one really wants to make something that does not get used. Adoption rates matter, and that can give you a wedge as an IT person. I can't use this because it doesn't do the thing I need is valuable intel for your product manager. They want to see you adopt it, and if you can't, you have to tell them why. Those are both viable vectors for approach to changing product vision and to change product direction. In addition, product people live in the details. They live deep in the details, as Catherine talked about a little bit ago, in terms of how things operate and work. They want to know all the things you're considering. They want to know why you care about those things, and they need to know about the workflows you're using or considering. Nuance matters deeply because it allows them to think through all of the use cases and complications and applications of that particular function and feature. And that steers decision makings towards or away from other factors. If you don't know your product manager for a tool that you use, may I suggest LinkedIn searching who that person is and then finding their email through various and sundry means. You're IT people, you're creative. Find those people and introduce yourself. Meet them here. In addition, product managers care a lot about the future. Novelty has power because it can define markets. It can define a new approach. It can define a new source of revenue. It can define a simplification of an existing strategy and revenue. If you can show a PM that what you're asking for is both possible and novel, you can provide some catnip to their environment. Don't be afraid to nerd snipe your favorite PM this way. In fact, you should. So let's also talk about what they don't value. They do not care about a specific acronym or a specific technology. They do not care about a specific process or delivery mechanism. That's not the problem they're there to solve. They're there to solve the business problem and the application that approaches that thing from that perspective. They also have architects and engineers on their teams whose job it is to define that for their organization and their application of that particular space. In addition, they don't care about your deployment stack. They really, really don't. They care about what the task is that you are trying to accomplish, not all the myriad steps it has to flow through the environment that you're in. And then, very importantly, they do not care about the last angry customer that they talked with. They dealt with 6 of those before lunch today. Their job is the business, not just one customer. Unless you are more than half of that revenue, you're just a customer. You can be replaced also. Don't tell the sales guys that, they get really mad. So where can you work together? You have to work on what you both care about, which in a lot of things means providing good and honest feedback and talking in detail about why you want something. That why you want a specific thing a specific way allows them to adapt to and break through the secret in the cycle. It's time for the big secret. This is the important part of the last 10 minutes. None of these people are actually your adversary. None of these people are your opposition. Not one of these people means you harm. Okay, maybe it sometimes feels like Apple does, but I'm talking personally for a second. These people just have different aims and needs than you. Getting them to help you is all about seeing the world the same way, or getting them to see why what you want helps them also. When it comes to security, you have to help them avoid that Hacker News post because you also want to avoid the Hacker News post for the same reason. When it comes to business folks, you have to help them make their goals work because those goals drive the organization's growth and thus the growth of your department, or even just the continued size of that department, depending on how your organization is structured and functioning today. When it comes to your coworkers, knowing what they're up against and what you're asking of them is the critical part of that relationship. You're on the same team. You are supporting the same goals, vision, and mission as an organization. When it comes to Apple, again, this is probably the closest thing to a real adversary we have. The scale at which they operate, no matter how big you are, is vastly different than the scale at which you operate. That scale is your adversary more than anything else. But your superpower is the relationships you build in response to that. And lastly, you have to think like product managers to get your feedback addressed. I have a vendor that I have a great relationship with where my feature request list is a very lengthy Google Sheet with a lot of different pieces in there in terms of prioritization and what do we care about and how do we get these things aligned. Your relationship with them will help you get that alignment done better. And it will help you get to a solution faster. instead of just when things are on fire. The relationships that you craft as IT between your department and the people in your orbital system are the best non-code tool you have. And in fact, it's better than some of the code tools you have. They provide you with connective tissue that supports the work that you do. You get trust based on those relationships, and that is currency to implementation. With all that in mind, when we start thinking about our orbital systems, for example, what's our system? What pulls on us and what do we pull on? What is IT's place within your organization? I've yet to truly find an organization that only has to care about IT and not about business goals or about positioning or about technology for technology's sake. I hope somewhere they're out there, but I suspect it's just a myth. IT is never just for its own sake. And IT supports an organization's mission, vision, and values. And that sounds a whole bunch like corporate jargon, which can feel like misdirection and trash. But it's often instructive for creating a cohesive self-identity. Some places live their values and some places use it for cover. You'll have to figure out what that means and where you live within it. But with that said, there's a lot about our place that we can control and engage with. Knowing what the world looks like outside your department's walls is a huge factor in your success, whether you recognize it instinctively or you've put a lot of thought into it. So let's talk about where things fit inside your organization. If you're shipping your org chart, what are you delivering? And that's a difficult question. That concept of shipping your org chart is one I need to unpack. Organizations which design systems in the broad sense are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. Melvin Conway, this is Conway's Law from 1967. He coined the phrase in an interoffice memo pictured here. This became shortened down to shipping your org chart. How your company is organized is a strong indicator of what you are producing internally and externally. Is your IT department under HR or finance? You're likely grouped with other cost centers. Is your IT department under engineering? You're put with other resource production groups. Is your IT department under a CIO or CTO? You're aligned with policy choices. What you deliver at work depends strongly on how your organization is constructed and it reports internally. No matter how you're organized, there are some centralized resources you can provide for your team and your colleagues to help manage these interactions. Within these different formats, one of the things I found most valuable is promoting understanding of the organization's business cycles so that you can schedule your work appropriately. And so we're going to talk about a couple of tools that I've had to build over the last year. The first of those is a calendar of key dates, because if it helps you, it's going to help your team. And if you can publish this internally, it's also going to help your coworkers understand the entire cycle of the business, which is valuable. You're going to have team and department calendars that are going to have things like your APNS and developer certificates, your MDM renewals, your bandwidth contracts, your license renewals, your departmental KPI dates, as well as Apple's own dates and other key partner dates. In addition, you're going to have a divisional structure that's going to talk about your partnerships with other groups here, security audits within, Cyber Essentials and other things along those lines, compliance audits, divisional meetings, and, change control boards and change freeze windows. And last but not least, you're going to have your company environment. There are budget timelines for every organization under the sun. They go on a schedule. Know what that is. In addition, there's going to be a release schedule for your organization. There's stuff that you build and do. You need to understand where that lives. There are also going to be all company meetings periodically. You're going to have to adapt to those. There are going to be key external dates, fiscal reporting years, financial quarters, things along those lines. And of course, it's always nice to know when you're going to get paid. So that belongs on your calendar also. If you look also, there's probably a strong need for vendors in your environment. The vendors we work with are our force multipliers, much as we are the force multiplier for our internal coworkers as IT. If it helps you to have a list of vendors that include your bandwidth vendors, your network structure vendors, your cabling vendors, your device management vendors, as well as your business software, both for general use and line of business, You should have that directory someplace internally. You should have a good set of key people that are associated with it. You should understand who you're talking to. More than that, you're going to have partners, including contract developers, line of business software partners, project managers, general purchasing partners as well. You need to have a good understanding of what that structure of what is my set of resources to go with all of these things. This is where we have to stop and talk about how IT communicates for a second. Being a supporting player as a part of an organization means that you have to know you're a supporting player. None of us are going to win the Best Actor Oscar. We are here as the technical group. We are here for the technical awards. We get awards on different days. We're not even in the same space. It's fine. You may be lead for a project, but you're in furtherance of a mission you do not directly or completely control. And so what you have to do is talk to people as people. Spending time on communication can feel like busy work. But IT organizations that either obfuscate their message or don't choose to share a message at all are taking a risk of being isolated from the people that they help. I'm not saying you need a massive and encompassing IT philosophy, but as a department, you need to have a philosophy that works, that talks about how you communicate with others. At IMP, IT's mission is very simple. The show must go on. We support venues who support artists. For us to be successful, our artists need to be successful. And that means the show has to happen. They need the revenue from those tickets to be realized so that they can get paid, so that they can eat or stay in a hotel or, make it to the next city. We're responsible for that show. Lights, sound, refreshments, security, even internet. That means those things have to happen. Is IT solely responsible for some of those things? We are not. While I might look like a bouncer in the right light, I'm not security. I could probably run ice to the wells and stock our bars as a bar back, but I'm not on the bar team. We need to make sure that the bar team can order successfully and that their counts are right and restored correctly. We need to make sure that security has space to do their de-escalation training and to learn how to watch crowds. We need to support our talent bookers, the marketing team, the venue operations group. We are part of the picture, but we are not the whole. So what we need to do is make sure the other departments are supported by our efforts, and that's the result of being visible and present in their environment. I spend most of my days on the venue floor. The worst thing that you can do is be utterly invisible to your organization. Sure, remove friction where you can, but the friction can also be the rumble strip on the road that wakes people up. So let's talk about organizational dynamics for a minute. When you're talking to people, you need to have a lot going for you. You need to remember that your technical jargon won't feel as comfortable to your coworkers as it does to you, and that can make things worse. Changes the dynamic structure of the conversation. And you can't remove so much friction from your processes that people don't appreciate that you exist. This is the other one that's a little tricky for IT sometimes. You have to recognize what is the driver of your organization's success. Is it just plain money? For some places, yeah, it is. Is it academic success? Is it market share? Is it grants or awards? Is it widgets produced? Is it code produced? All of those things have to weigh in on your environment as you understand what your organization is doing. Business culture has become performance-oriented culture. We're told to measure and meet KPIs constantly, but where do those metrics come from? What drives performance to sane levels? Okay, who here has seen The Wire? HBO show, about half. It's a police drama for those who haven't seen it, and congrats, you're gonna watch something amazing. It's set in Baltimore, Maryland, near to where I live on the East Coast. And it's a city that's known for being a little bit rough and tumble. There was a saying on the show, juke the stats and majors become colonels. If you figure out how to game the KPI system, you can find yourself promoted. But juking the stats comes with a cost. The show is very clear about what that cost is. When people realize that metrics aren't real or aren't representative of the problems or the environment in which they're created, you're going to face a bit of a come down, and people are going to be like, oh, you juked the stats to get to where you are. That's not awesome. That's not a good feeling. So how do you make sure that people care about the right things? And the answer is you start by tying your goals to the sensible part of the organization's goals. You cannot reduce ticket count to 0. That means the first accidental password change or the first, hey, I need this new piece of software, resets your counter to you have failed. You cannot set time on ticket metrics without encouraging fast fixes, not good fixes. So be aware that the metrics you choose affect the outcome of your department's success. Let's not sugarcoat it, though. The organization you work for has to have some money. Doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit or a Fortune 100, there's a stream of funding that comes into the organization from somewhere to pay your salary, to pay the salaries of your coworkers, and cover expenses. Where does that money come from in your organization? And can you answer that question? What puts that supply at risk? What would cause the spigot to open wider? What would happen if your organization was suddenly very, very successful? And how would you know ahead of time? Determining the source of your organization's success or failure becomes a way to help drive your team's goals. It's not all about making money, but if you can help turn the dial so that your teams can ship more code, sell more widgets, win more grants, get more funding, or teach students better, knowing that you have influenced that process shows that you're a part of the organization that's succeeding. And that can lead to more resources for yourself. Oh, I did not realize I had more builds. I put the euros and the money signs on there. Sorry. In my case, at IMP, the question becomes, what allows us to book one more show a week? What allows us to sell more concessions? What allows us to get more people in the door? And what makes them happier to be there so they buy more concessions or merch? The IT department can be part of that process. Are transactions on the point of sale system slow? How can we speed that up? How can we help our bookers get easily on and off the phone with key information? How can we give them fingertip access to what that band played on the last 10 shows that they've done at our venues so that we can give them an attractive deal so that they come back the next time? There are those top-line metrics that we're watching for internally. Our goal is to support the business, so optimizing our network so that we can help the throughput of the bar traffic go faster and better gives us a better patron experience, which means the patrons are more likely to come back. A smoother payment experience is what we're hunting for right now. The US is a little far behind from Europe on tap to pay and touch pay, and if you find yourself at a bar in America, the point of sale system is usually on the back bar, and that's usually where the payment terminal is too. And so it doesn't always reach to the front of the bar so that you can do an Apple Pay transaction. Are you going to hand your unlocked phone to a bartender? You are not. So what's our goal? A transaction with a bartender taking less than 30 seconds for the patron, separate from them making up their mind. That means clear and accurate digital signage on the menu and an easy payment flow that's secure. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, how does your team help your org tangibly succeed? All of these things can drive conflict. What about conflict? In the case of our point of sale solution, we have to address a social challenge. We have to change how we bartend. Because we're used to typewriter bartending, where you've got a set of people and I'm going to be like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? We're going to start making drinks while I grab transactions. We're going to have two people working in a tandem pair. That does not always work in a concession-style bartending environment where you want to know, like, hey, is this person's tab going to work? Is their payment going to work before I start pouring the beer? When we started down this road, I only knew two things that we wanted. we wanted Apple Pay supported at the bar, and we didn't like our current payment processor because they were slow. Those are the two things we knew going into the conversation. With that, I started by talking to our bar managers and our bar backs. What don't you like about those two requirements? What are you afraid of that those requirements drive? And the answer was, it's going to have to change how I bartend because I now have to finish your transaction before I start yours. And it means I have to, take orders one at a time. Is that going to slow me down? Is having a slower process going to mean less tips for me? I don't know. And I'm concerned about that because in the US, tips are most of the wages that bartenders make. And so that service experience has to feel good to the patron in order for the bartender to be successful. I know we're very antiquated about that, and I'm sorry in advance. When we started talking about that process, we still really weren't taking chip cards until 2020. And our point of sale system predates that. And so it was a lot more challenge to those things. But the conflict that we had with our bartenders, with our bar managers, and our staff resulted in trust because we had to show them that we understood what their problem was. We had to show them that we understood that what we were putting at risk was their tips. And we had to internalize that and say, okay, cool, we just need to make these transactions super fast so that everybody can get through the process and we don't have a lineup at the bar. Because that's nothing that anybody wants. Joel gave me this one. Conflict brings resolution. All of the things that we talked about can drive conflict. In the case of in the case of that process, we had a conflict between the bar. They didn't want to change how they bartended. Bartenders are very averse to change, as I've discovered. They have a lot of opinions and they're not afraid to share them. They're social animals. It's great. But when we showed them that this wasn't going to affect their tips, and in fact we're going to give them more transactions, and that we could bump the bar number up, and they could see a possible future where they were making more, fantastic, wonderful. Suddenly we had allies. And when we did our point of sale tests, they were super clear about, was that faster? Was that better? Could I serve more people? Because they saw it at the end of the night in the tip report. And we had one system that was super great for the bartenders, and we had one system that was absolutely not. And it was immediately and apparently clear what the value to the business was. We learned, and we learned as a team as part of this process. All right, 11 minutes, cool, I got time. So we spent time learning as a team. But before we could start to learn as a team, we had to learn how to learn. And for this next one, I want to thank Mr. Dreyer, who sent me this book 4 years ago, 3.5, somewhere in there. And he was like, I've read this book, it was amazing. And I downloaded it that day, and it was like, oh, that is amazing. Now, I apologize, that is an Amazon link, but buy it wherever you like. Get it from the library. Overdrive is amazing. Libby, all these tools, they're incredible. This book is awesome. It's one of the most impactful IT reads I've had in the last decade. Neither of the next two of the books that I'm going to talk about today are terribly technical, but they are critical to how people approach their environments. Daniel Kahneman talks a lot about how we think. And there are two key systems in which we think. We think fast because we have instinctual responses to situations. Because we have learned enough to build an internal system where input meant instant output. There's another system where we have to spend time. And I remember the first time I converted something from System 2 to System 1 was at MacTech in LA when I finally figured out how Wi-Fi worked. Like the actual radio parts of Wi-Fi and how you do the channelization and what that actually means in terms of the thing. And then it was like, whew, everything everywhere all at once. That process of moving something from System 2 to System 1 is possible but unlikely. So you have to deal with some of that approach. This is a fun one. Get the audiobook. It's even better. It helps you process in new and different ways. You're going to need a couple times through on this one. The most key lessons, though, from the books that I provided was from this one, which is on teaching you how to reevaluate your decisions, which we need to do more than we actually do. Spending time changing how we approach a problem will help us be more successful with it. And this book has me thinking a lot more about the phrase, what got you here won't get you there. I've had to learn that lesson a number of times, and it never fails to be painful. Because you always try the approach that worked last time, even if the problem's a little bit different. It's painful to think about those things. Spending time thinking about how people make up their minds, however, will allow you to approach IT with new eyes and figure out where you can help achieve compliance without pain or achieve security without pushback as much. So there are a lot of discussions on pedagogical learning methods, and here we all are at Chalmers University where we spend time teaching things, and we all teach each other this week. Some folks are classroom learners, and other folks require practical experience. Some folks need a lecture while others want a book to read. Developing a program to build your team up, your people up, leveling them up, levels you up. Their success is yours. That allows you to force multiply in new and different ways. It's a key part of IT leadership. Spending time with your team, thinking through problems, not just dictating approaches, and sharing how things are going is important. Andrew's talk yesterday about the psychological safety needed to ask for help, ask for knowledge, and speak freely. That is a critical part of any organization's growth of individual contributors. One of the harder lessons I had to learn in management was the loss of a possible teammate. They were a little difficult to work with, but very bright and engaged. And the question became not, what happens if they leave, but what happens if they stay? Building up your resources so that they can move into bigger and better roles is the cycle of things. And no one is going to stay in the same role forever. You just can't expect that of people. And so now we're going to talk about the balance of care. This is the hard part of this talk, and I apologize in advance if it is triggering for anybody. There's a joke about Americans being workaholics. It used to be funny to me. And a bunch of Instagram reels comparing American teams to European ones, I would laugh my way through. Ha, ha, ha. But then I discovered what burnout is like. I did not care for that experience. I hope none of you ever have to go through it if you've never have. And if you have gone through it, I hope that you never have to go through it ever again. So we're going to talk about the hard truths about work and self. You don't care enough. Who here has heard this in a work context? There's always something else grabbing at your attention that you don't care about enough in your job. It's always an insistent call from your coworker with an immediate problem that needs resolution. There's always a preparation that someone wants you to make that they haven't told you about. Your job is going to tell you you don't care enough. There's literally too much for you to care about. So what can you do to prioritize? The worst interruption to your calm can be an escalation that isn't, in fact, critical. And this is where severity scales exist for a reason. And building your own will help you respond accordingly. Publishing the playbooks for your severity scales set the right and acceptable expectations for what's happening. And this is where it goes back to communications with the rest of your organization. Over the weekend, last weekend, we had a problem with one of our festival areas not processing credit cards very fast. It was an auxiliary area at the end of the venue. And, that area was super important to us. It was still very important. Merch sales are a revenue driver, but the show was active. There was no way to move the network closer without exterior ladders and cabling, which we couldn't block during an active show without compromising another concessions activity. We made the decision to tough it out until morning and tolerate a longer line for the evening while we staged everything for another cable run to the gates the next morning. This was a reduction in stress for everyone involved because we had a clear set of criteria for the outage and a clear SLA for what the resolution was. Making those things public, we got the report, hey, we're having trouble with credit card payments here. Transactions are taking 30 seconds when they should take 5. And the line was building up and folks were getting a little frustrated. We could talk about, well, what can we do without closing things down? What can we do by moving things around? And the question wasn't, can we do more? The answer was yes, but not without making things worse for everyone else around us. We chose not to make things worse. The other thing we've heard is you care too much. There are probably a dozen things in your environment today that you care too much about. It's okay. It's good to care about what you do and how it affects your coworkers and friends at work. But let's differentiate this a minute and let's talk about why do you care about this? Because there are a couple different types of care, and whether or not they're healthy, well, let's talk. I care about this because I think it's really neat. Welcome to the pull zone that Andrina talked about. This is pulling you in. Listen to that impulse. You may care a little bit too much about it, but this is going to be the thing that maybe defines you at work. That's okay. That's good. Oh, sorry, other way. I care because I know what's at stake here. This is a little bit more aggressive. However, stakes provide goals. They push us to be deeper. They pull us away from safety and into achievement. Don't freak out if you know what's at stake if you don't succeed. This caution will sharpen your plans like iron on iron. I care because if I don't, no one will. Now we're in the danger zone, friends. Is it fair for you to be the only one who cares about something? Friends, it is not. Vacation exists, sick time exists, your family exists, lunch breaks exist. Your friends need you too. Anything that is this important needs a continuity plan with a backup and help and contingency planning. Start building those now, because you cannot be the only one to care about something. Or if you do, perhaps it's not very important to your organization and you should get rid of it. You should kill it. I care because if it doesn't go perfectly, something very bad will happen, and it will be my fault. Yeah? Yeah. This is where we talk about anxiety for a minute. It's okay to care about stuff. It's okay to care deeply about stuff. It is natural to want to do well. However, when that care tips over the first two of these bullets to the third and then this last, you are not in healthy territory, friends. And it's time to take action, perhaps drastic, to listen to the voice inside of you that says enough. If you have gotten to this point, as last year when I stood on this stage, I had, you have to make a change because you are now carrying too much. That change can feel like failure. So let's talk about what failure is. Who here has failed at something work-related in the last 5 years? Last year? Last quarter? Failure is a pretty great teacher. Going through the crucible of failure will make you a stronger person, a more capable technical practitioner, and a better leader. You have to be okay with failing. There are healthy ways to fail and there are unhealthy ways to fail. You have to let your people fail too. You have to encourage them even sometimes to fail, to find the edge of their capabilities. However, I want to say very, very clearly and very, very loudly that failure is not a cause for shame. Malignance is, ignorance may be, failure is not a cause for shame. So I am not by default a tattoo person, or at least not yet. But were I to change my mind and become one, this mantra would find itself in ink. The only way out is through. I learned this in 2015 when we were halfway through the rebuild at Merriweather. We were in part of a $60 million renovation of this historic venue where we had upended everything. Not a single building stood. And a friend said, from here on out, even though we were halfway through the project and nothing remained on the site, we had crossed the Rubicon. The only way out was through. It stuck. As a team, as a department, there are challenges galore, and not every project will have a perfect ending. But there will always be an ending, and you have to look for that. It may always not be the ending that you want, but it will be there. And lastly, related to care, I want to leave you with this from John Wesley. which says, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. And with that, I say thank you, Maxis Hinman.